G'day, it's Steve here and welcome to Fortress Learning. In this bite-sized tutorial, I'm going to explain the difference between pre and post-assessment validation and why they are such important processes. Let's start by taking a look at pre-assessment validation. Pre-assessment validation is a quality assurance process for checking newly developed assessment tools before they're used with real candidates for the very first time. The process focuses on ensuring that the assessment complies with the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence. The pre-assessment validation process aims to identify and fix potential issues with the assessment tools before they are put to use. The process should ensure that the assessment tools will appropriately assess what they claim to be assessing and that the methods used and their complexity are in line with the assessment requirements and the AQF guidelines. Checking the content of the assessment instruments against the competency mapping document will assist in identifying any gaps that may exist between the criteria being assessed and the requirements of the unit. This process will also help identify any tasks or questions that don't properly address the criteria. In this example, the assessment instrument has 3 questions, but the competency map identifies that there should be 4 questions. This would identify in the validation process that a gap exists where some criteria is not being assessed by the assessment tool. This can now be fixed before the tool is used for the first time. The pre-assessment validation involves analysing the assessment tool against the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence. And it requires the validation panel to ask questions like, are the assessment methods valid and collecting the right type of evidence? Like using practical tasks to assess skills and using some form of questioning to assess knowledge requirements. Are the assessment instructions, tasks, and questions clear and consistently interpreted by everybody? Is there sufficient evidence being collected to cover the unit's requirements? And does the assessment ensure currency and authenticity of the evidence? Conducting good quality pre-assessment validation of assessment tools to find any issues and fix them before they're used will certainly help to ensure problem-free assessment processes for everyone. Now let's take a look at post-assessment validation, which occurs after the assessment tool has been used with real candidates, the assessment judgments have been made by the assessor, and the results have been recorded. You may be asking yourself why we need to validate again when it's already been done. Well, the pre-assessment validation looks for issues based on how the assessment tool was expected to perform, and post-assessment validation looks at how the tool actually performed. The validation process looks at how the assessment was administered, the quality of the evidence that's been prepared and presented by the candidate, and the accuracy of the assessment judgments, including the feedback and guidance that's been provided to the candidate. The post-assessment validation process seeks to evaluate if the assessment tool reliably produced evidence that allowed a reasonable decision to be made by the assessor about a candidate's competence. Now, because industry trends and requirements are constantly evolving, the post-assessment validation process is also an ideal opportunity to check that the evidence that candidates are being asked to produce is still valid and current in terms of industry expectations. Post-assessment validation is a formal and mandatory process that every RTO must undertake. The standards for registered training organisations requires all RTOs to develop and follow a 5-year plan for the validation of all their nationally recognised training and assessment products. The plan must ensure that at least 50% of their training and assessment products are validated within the first 3 years, and the balance must be completed by the end of the 5-year cycle. To find out more information about the validation obligations of RTOs, visit the ASQA website. Thanks for watching, and if a career as a trainer in vocational education is something you're interested in, contact Fortress Learning to see just how you can get started.